I've always had really messed up teeth growing up, like atrociously bad. Due to that and a few other things, I got my wisdom teeth out really late in life. Most people who undergo the process get them out sometime in high school or at the very latest early into their college years. But I was different. I didn't even sit down for a consultation until after graduating college. The process was incredibly painful, and one of the most irritating things I've gone through in my entire life. I'm not going to bore you with all the details about my recovery, but there is something you need to know. For whatever reason, the pain I was experiencing was so bad that I couldn't sleep through the night without taking pain medication. I developed the system where I would wake myself up every 3 hours to take another pill, cycling between the two medications I'd been prescribed. It was awful, but it was the only thing I could do to prevent these massive toothaches that would quite literally have me in tears. It should go without saying that my sleep schedule was downright awful during that period. My body started getting used to 3-hour cycles of sleep followed by periods of being awake, and it was difficult to return to normal even after my recovery was over. That was honestly the worst part, the sleep. It was not normal. I'm telling you, I didn't even feel human after a while. It was like I had become something else, constantly waking up and going back to sleep. I don't even want to think about it. One night, I'm pretty sure it was during the first week of recovery, I was up at like 4:00 a.m. to take my meds again. For whatever reason, I couldn't fall back asleep afterwards. I don't know if it was because of my condition or because the AC had stopped working, but it was really hot in my room, way hotter than usual. I remember tossing and turning for like 10 minutes before deciding I had to do something about the heat. The only thing I could think of was to open my bedroom window, which I did. That helped a little bit, but I still couldn't sleep. So there I was lying there miserably in bed, praying with every fiber of my being that I just fall asleep. But of course I didn't. At one point, I started picking up on the strange noise coming from outside my window. I never slept with my window open, so at first I figured it was just some normal outside sound that I wasn't used to hearing. But the more I listened, the more I got the feeling that it wasn't a normal sound. It sounded almost like scratching, as if some kind of animal were dragging its claws on something. That's the best way I can describe it. At one point, the noise got louder, and I realized it sounded like it was coming from above me, from the roof. And then a few seconds later, the noise started moving above me, gradually fading out of earshot. I was pretty positive at that point that it was some kind of critter messing around on the roof. My family lives in a woodsy area, so we've had our fair share of curious raccoons and pest infestations. I really wanted to just ignore it and go back to sleep, but I knew my dad would be livid if something burrowed into our attic again, so I had to do something. Plus, it wasn't like I was on the brink of falling asleep anyway. I was wide awake, so without much thought, I threw my covers off, jumped out of bed, and started making my way to the garage. From there, I grabbed one of my dad's heavy-duty flashlights and walked back through the house to the back door. My room sits on the first floor near the back of the house where the roof is the lowest, so I figured I'd check over there first. I made it to the spot outside my bedroom window and started sweeping the flashlight beam across the roof. I didn't see anything up there, so I sighed and figured the animal had crawled to a different part of the roof in the time it had taken me to get outside. I started walking around the house, trying my best to illuminate as much of the roof as possible. All I really needed to do was scare the animal away, which would be pretty easy if I could just find the damn thing. I was scanning near the front of the house, where the roof is nearly twice as high, when I spotted something shift in the corner of my flashlight beam. With one quick flick of my wrist, I shot the flashlight toward the spot I had seen movement and nearly passed out. There, standing on the roof, was a person. Not an animal, not a pack of animals, but a fully grown human being. There was a naked human being standing on my roof, frozen in the beam of my flashlight, I screamed. I couldn't help it, and as soon as I did, the person on the roof started moving, almost like they were allergic to the light of my flashlight. I tried to trace their movements with the light, but they were absurdly fast. Until that moment, I didn't know it was possible to move so fast barefoot, let alone on the loose shingles of an uneven roof. They started making their way back to where my room was, and I sprinted around the house to intercept them. I don't even know what I was thinking. I should have just ran back inside, but there was some deep instinct in me that prevented me from backing off. I yelled for my dad as I ran, hoping he'd be able to get outside in time to help me ward off or restrain the psycho on our roof. I made it to the back of the house just in time to see the person preparing to jump off the roof. My first thought was that there was no way. There was absolutely no way a person could jump off that roof without suffering serious injuries, even from that lower point. Surely they'd have to find another way down. But without hesitation, the person jumped, slamming into the concrete with a deafening thump. The shock of what I was seeing had me frozen in place at that point. I couldn't even process what was going on because of how insane it was that someone had actually just jumped off our roof. I don't know how he didn't shatter every bone in his legs. My dazed shock only lasted a split second, but that was enough. The person immediately got up off the paver stones and charged toward me, tackling me to the ground. He started clawing at my eyes almost like he was trying to rip my face off. I screamed and kicked, but I couldn't get him off me. He was grunting and spitting, and there was no logical explanation for how someone like that could be so strong. I started feeling blood pouring down my face, and in that moment I thought I was going to die. But then, over the sound of my own screaming, I heard the back door burst open. Seconds later, my dad was pulling the person off of me, cursing and yelling like it was life or death. I got up off the ground just in time to see that psycho breaking free of my dad's grasp, completely covered in my blood. Instead of continuing to attack me or my dad, he ran to the edge of our yard, scaled our backyard fence, and disappeared into the darkness. My dad and I stood there in shock while the sounds of his footsteps crashing through the forest faded into the distance. I'll fast forward through the rest. I had to go to the hospital that night. My dad almost crashed just trying to get me there. I had lost a ton of blood, and the doctors had to give me all sorts of shots to prevent me from getting any infections or diseases that Guy might have had. It was a nightmare. The one saving grace was that my mouth was basically untouched, so my teeth didn't need to be re-examined. The police were useless, not like they could have done much anyway. They said searching the woods would be unfeasible given how vast it was, and insisted that simple security cameras would have prevented the whole thing. My dad later discovered that the person on the roof had been trying to dig into our attic, just like an animal would. Ironically, it wasn't my dad or me who was the most affected. It was my mom. She cried about this incident so many times, and she was actually the one who went ahead and upped our home security. I still have no explanation for what happened that night. Who that guy was, where he had come from, and how he had even found our house are just a few of the 1,000 questions about that night that I fear will never be answered. My house is a very unique design. Well, I call it unique, but I bet a lot of people would call it weird instead, and actually they have. The vast majority of friends I've hosted have all said so, even a handful of girls I've snuck in while my parents were away. As much as I'd love to make things easy for myself and just attach a bunch of photos of the house, I don't think my parents would appreciate that too much. So, instead, I'll just tell you the important details. As it pertains to the story, there's really only one you need to know. You know how most houses have a porch or a walkway leading up to the front door, and there's usually some sort of covering above the door, maybe called a door canopy. Well, my house basically has a covered hallway that you have to walk through before entering the actual interior. Imagine your own front door, part of the house on either side, and then push the front door entrance back into the house, so to speak. It's essentially like walking in between two parts of the house without even being inside. This is all to say that my bedroom is on the first floor, right next to the external hallway that leads to the front door. If I stand up and look out the window next to my bed, I can actually see anyone standing at the front door, but they'd have their back to me. Hopefully that description makes sense. I developed a habit at a really young age of peeping out that window whenever a delivery person or a guest would ring the doorbell. It was like having a little hidden camera that I could use to check who was there before stepping in full view of the door. What I'm about to tell you happened just a few months ago at the very beginning of the summer. My parents were out of town for the week, so I decided to take advantage of the situation and let my girlfriend Anna sleep over for a few days. Normally, my strict and traditional parents would be very opposed to anything like that, but what they didn't know wouldn't hurt them. Plus, they'd met Anna a million times, so it wasn't like I was bringing an unwelcome stranger into our home. The first night was relatively uneventful, just a chill movie night with some snacks and a few glasses of wine. We went to sleep at a reasonable hour and went for a dip in the pool the following morning. I'm not really much of a party person, and neither is Anna, so we were more than happy to just spend some time together relaxing, playing games, and watching TV. The second night was when things went down. It was probably sometime around midnight. We were pillow talking in the dark, about to go to sleep, when I heard something from outside. It sounded like a screeching or something being dragged. I shushed Anna and listened, trying to figure out what I was hearing. It sounded like it was coming from the driveway, which is off to the side of the house. That alarmed me mostly because it meant the sound was coming from really close to the actual house. I listened a little while longer and realized it was the sound of one of my dad's trash cans being moved around. He sometimes keeps them in front of the garage, and I was pretty positive I had seen a couple of them out there earlier that day. My first thought was that he hadn't fully emptied them, and some animal was poking around looking for scraps or food or something. Still though, animal or not, hearing things moving around in your driveway is creepy, especially when you're the only one home and it's too dark to see anything. I told Anna to stay put, telling her that I was going to go shoo away the raccoon or other animal that was rummaging through the trash. Then I calmly walked out of my room and over to the front door. I flicked on the switch for the exterior lights, but they didn't illuminate the driveway enough for me to see anything, just the front yard and the porch. So reluctantly, I opened the door and walked outside, hoping my presence would be enough to scare off whatever was out there. I stood on the porch for a few seconds, waiting to hear scampering or see an animal run across the yard, but nothing happened. In fact, even the sound of the trash can had stopped. I figured there was a slim chance that whatever had been there had already run away, but concluded it was unlikely since I had been watching and listening the whole time. So, even more reluctantly, I clicked on my phone flashlight and started walking down the front steps toward the driveway. As I got closer, I realized that one of the trash cans had indeed been messed with. Two of them were sitting against the garage door, but one of them was completely overturned with its contents scattered across the driveway. I groaned, knowing I was going to have to clean up the mess. I should mention that I didn't see anything out there even after approaching, so I figured the animal had slunk away without me noticing. Just to be completely sure, I shined my flashlight all around the trash cans, but there was still nothing there. So that confirmed it. Without much more thought, I started picking stuff up from the driveway and throwing it back in the trash can. After I finished with that, I went back inside, opened the garage door, moved the trash cans inside, and locked it. I didn't want to run the risk of something returning later and waking me up. Then I went back to bed. Anna was still awake, but barely. I could tell she was about to fall asleep, so I gave her a gentle kiss on the forehead and tried to get comfortable on my side of the bed without disturbing her too much. I was in that in-between phase of consciousness and unconsciousness where you're half dreaming, but can pull yourself out of it if you concentrate, and that's when I heard something. This gentle tapping noise like metal on glass. I was convinced it was part of the half-dream I was having, but something about it was just the slightest bit too unsettling. So, instead of succumbing to exhaustion and drifting off into sleep, I opened my eyes and looked around the room. Sure enough, the tapping sound didn't stop. I froze. It hadn't been in my own head. It was coming from somewhere in the room. I didn't move a muscle. I just listened, trying to pinpoint exactly where it was emanating from, or even what it was. After a few seconds, I realized it wasn't coming from inside the room at all, even though it sounded so clear. That could only mean one thing, though. It was coming from just outside my window. I forced myself out of bed, stood up slowly, and peeked behind the curtain of my bedroom window. In the minimal light from outside, I could see the outline of a person standing at the front door with their back to me. It was terrifying. I looked for a little while longer and realized they were lightly tapping on the glass over and over and over again, as if expecting someone to answer the door, but that was insane. It was past midnight and none of the house lights were on. I tried to make out more details about the person, but I couldn't see anything distinctive without more light. As I was standing there watching them, I noticed them start to turn around. Without thinking, I ducked under the light just in time, and I felt my heart start racing. I must have stayed crouched behind the window for a full minute, terrified that they had seen me. I didn't want to look again, but I had to. With a deep breath, I mustered up the courage to take another look out the window. Slowly, I stood back up, peeled the curtain back, and instantly regretted it. There, just 2 in from the glass, was a face staring back at me. I yelled and recoiled from the window, yanking the curtain shut again. Even though we were only face to face for a split second, I was able to make out that it was a man with shriveled-looking skin, like someone whose face was melting away. As I fell back onto the bed, still yelling uncontrollably, and I woke up. I screamed that there was someone outside, then made sure my bedroom door was locked before grabbing my phone and calling the police. The cops showed up a little over 10 minutes later. Anna and I stayed locked in my room the entire time. I really wanted to run to the front door to see where the creep had gone, but Anna was clutching onto my arm and wouldn't let me. When the police finally arrived, I let them inside and told them everything I had seen. They did a quick sweep of the house, and with my help, we confirmed that there was no sign of forced entry, and the entire house was locked up. That put me at ease, but it still didn't explain why that guy was creeping around my house and where he had gone. Eventually, after walking the perimeter with their flashlights and poking around the yard, they told us they didn't find anything unusual. One of them told me to call back should I see that guy again, then they left. The rest of the week passed without incident. I ended up telling my parents, who to my surprise didn't seem overly concerned about it. We don't exactly live in a sketchy neighborhood, so I was surprised that they were being so nonchalant about the whole thing. To be fair, though, their reaction made me feel like I was overreacting a little bit. I mean, what had really happened? Some homeless guy had crept around her house. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I was making a big deal out of nothing. But if that were the case, I probably wouldn't be writing this. The reason I'm writing this now is because for the past few nights, I've woken up randomly in the middle of the night to strange noises coming from outside my window. Not my trash cans moving around like what I had heard before, but different sounds. I told my dad about them, and he's actually planning on installing some security cameras around the perimeter of our house. But still, I can't help but feel like that guy showing up at my house wasn't a one-off thing. If anything else happens, I'll be sure to send a follow-up. Music, what you're about to hear is an experience that nearly made me lose my mind. It's still something that I think about quite often if I'm being honest, but I've been able to recover a bit in the months since it's happened. The whole story is pretty quick, so I'll get right into it. I'm a single guy in my mid-30s. I live alone with no pets in a small one-story house. The house is really modest. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a living room, kitchen, dining room, and a tiny garage. That's it. Life is fantastic. Because of my profession, I can work on my own time and don't have to answer to anyone, whether that be a girlfriend, a parent, or an employer. Freedom has always been an imperative part of my life, so I've done my best to maximize it wherever possible. I know a lot of people are different, and a lot of people might actually judge me for my quote immature lifestyle. But everyone has different priorities and preferences. So, as long as no one judges me, I won't judge them. The excess freedom is definitely tethered to its own set of drawbacks, though. I've developed some bad habits that I'm sure some people would frown upon. One of them is my sleep schedule, which is god-awful. For some reason, I'm most productive at late hours of the night, so I often find myself staying up until dawn and sleeping into the afternoon. It's just how my body functions. And until I'm absolutely forced to, I don't see a reason to change anything. I was up really late one night. I'm talking past 3:00 a.m. late. I was sitting at my desk getting some work done on my computer. I was in the zone, not even listening to music. Imagine yourself at peak hours. That's the kind of groove I was in. The room was dead silent, and I was alone with my thoughts, the sound of my keyboard and my work. And then, bam, out of nowhere, the silence was interrupted by the sound of footsteps pounding down the hallway towards my bedroom, followed by 3 or 4 bangs on the bedroom door. Like deafening bangs, the type of bangs you'd expect the police trying to barge into a drug den would make. I shot up from my chair so fast, I banged my knee on the desk and knocked my monitor over. I was just so shocked. It caught me completely off guard. Just imagine being in your own house at 3:00 a.m. Alone and complete silence just gets interrupted by banging on your door. It was and still is the most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me. Standing up was a pure reaction. I was completely frozen after that. I had my eyes fixated on the door, dreading the moment I knew was coming. The door bursting open and someone barging into my room. Me having to fight a complete stranger in pitch-black darkness. But it never came. I didn't hear anything else. Not even the sounds of footsteps retreating from the door. It was like I had imagined it, but I was 100% positive I hadn't. I don't know how long I stood there, but I physically could not force myself to move. It was like sleep paralysis, except I hadn't been dreaming. And then finally, I heard the sounds of footsteps quickly walking back down the hall. So someone had been there. I don't know why, but hearing those footsteps again unlocked my brain. Without thinking, I grabbed an empty beer bottle off my desk, ran to the door, and started chasing after whoever had broken into my home. I didn't even try to be quiet. I screamed at the top of my lungs like a lunatic, hoping that would give me the extra adrenaline I needed. I ran through the entire house screaming, but I never found anyone. My house isn't that big. There aren't many places someone could hide, but even after checking every room, there was no one there. All the doors and windows were locked too, which was even more confusing. My bout of confidence was completely drained after that, and I felt fear start flooding back in. I sprinted back to my room, locked the door, and called the police. In the time it took the police to arrive, I listened to my surroundings in complete silence, but never heard anything. When the police finally showed up, we searched the house together but found nothing. One of the officers tried to convince me that whoever had been there had left, but I insisted that everything had been locked up. He told me I had probably overlooked something, and it took everything in me not to curse him out right there. I know for a fact that nothing had been unlocked, but that didn't explain how that person had gotten into and out of my house, unless I had imagined it, but I know I didn't. For the next week, I was a psychological mess. My brain refused to accept that I had imagined something so vivid, but I couldn't conceive of a possible way that that person had gotten into and out of my house. I'm much better now, but there was a time where I had trouble sleeping, eating, working, everything. Even now, the only explanation I can think of is that I somehow didn't notice an unlocked window or door in my house. Still, though, why anyone would crash through my house just to run away is a complete